Hello and welcome to episode 251 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, a Sam Altman-backed startup is turning sunlight into heat stored in bricks inside modular containers that can be deployed anywhere. It may have been powering the data center where I got that information from, in fact.
Heat pumps once again outsold gas furnaces in the U.S. this past year. It's an epic battle, like Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, but with lower ratings.
Japan's biggest nuclear plant remains shunted after the 2011 Fukushima disaster, all because the local governor, who probably thinks Godzilla is real.
Plans to build a dam in the Czech Republic have been thwarted by beavers, who went ahead and built the dam for free. I might as well let out this secret right now. All of Canada's hydroelectric dams have been built for free by beavers, and they don't even get health care out of it.
No wonder we want to be taken over. All that and more in this edition of the Clean Energy Show. And also, Brian, I don't always plug it, but we've got a good lightning round this week. So that's coming up as well as other things on the show.
Great. Glad to hear. Okay, so I came across an interesting clip online this week that I thought I would share. We love to share climate change stuff that's a little bit entertaining and hopefully not super depressing. But yeah, I came across this clip from Saturday Night Live. This is Mike Myers, the Canadian comedian. And all the way back in 1990, he had a sketch on SNL called the Climate Change Christmas Special. And we have a clip.
It's the Global Warming Christmas Special with Carl Sagan, starring Kirstie Alley, Dr. William R. Keeler from the Chicago Institute of Meteorological Studies, funny man Louis Anderson, Professor I. Bennett Eckling, Chief Atmospheric Physicist from the World Resources Institute, Mr. Dean Martin. Okay, Dean, because after all, the Earth's atmosphere operates as a greenhouse, if you will. When there's too much carbon dioxide, it blocks out the shoe. Our CO2 concentration has risen to 350 parts per million, mostly due to the fossil fuel consumption and the rise in other trace gases.
Holy crap, Brian.
Yeah.
1990.
Yeah.
Saturday Night Live of all things.
Yeah.
Wow. Like, I'm a bit gobsmacked by that. Like, that's... I mean, if we heard it now, I would say, yay, somebody's paying attention. But 1990?
Yeah.
Do the math. How many years ago was that?
That was a lot of years ago. But the one that I looked up, when did The Inconvenient Truth come out? And that is 2006. So
2006?
Yeah. So
I
they
thought it was
beat Al
earlier than
Gore.
that. Holy crap.
No, 2006. So they beat Al Gore. Mike Myers beat Al Gore by 26
Okay, so
years.
they probably wouldn't have done the sketch if it wasn't an issue that was covered in the news and that people weren't somewhat aware of. Because if you have no context, what's the point? And they're not known for their activism necessarily on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Except for some social issues and some political issues. But this, I've watched the show, not religiously, but I've watched it over the years. I really enjoyed the 50th anniversary special and every interview and documentary that accompanied it. But this is really surprising to me. And it's funny. It
is funny. Isaac Asimov makes an appearance, and
it almost seems like an SCTV sketch, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's true. It is. It has that kind of sense of humor. Well, maybe that's the Canadian coming through from Mike Myers, and that was Tom Hanks as Dean Martin in that clip.
Oh, really? So he was a guest host, I imagine. Then
probably
one of his earlier ones, not his first one, but one of his earlier ones.
But the clip is also kind of hard to find. Like SNL. Has a sort of a checkered history of putting their stuff either online or not. So it's not available officially. I found it on a Reddit forum. So you can find it out there.
But it's on YouTube?
Yeah. No. It's just in a Reddit forum somewhere.
Okay. I'll put the link to the video on our Patreon page for a public post for everyone to see. Whether you're a paid member or a registered member, doesn't matter. Go see it there on our Patreon page because it's about 9 minutes and 30 seconds. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I got a text from my son who is off in another land, Surrey, BC, part of Vancouver, outside of Vancouver on the west coast of Canada. And it's the first time we've sent a kid away somewhere. The kid is gone. far away. He's been 2.5 hours away with his uncle before that for the rest of his university career. And then, so you start to worry about him because he doesn't have a lot of friends. He has coworkers he's friends with, but he hasn't formulated friendships yet because he's only been out there 6 weeks. So we get nervous we don't hear from him because, did he fall on his head? Could happen. He's a Whittingham.
Sure.
So I got a text from him that said in all caps, earthquake. And yeah, that's not something you want to see from your kid.
No.
Who is, he's an earthquake nerd, which doesn't help because then, if you're a volcanist, a volcano person and an earthquake nerd, then you know what can happen. And he spent way too much time watching documentaries and things on this, so he knows all about it. We discussed it before we went out there as a joke, more or less. And then this is the first earthquake they've had in like 20 years, the first significant one they've had in a long time.
Wow.
So he was there for it. And it wasn't much. It wasn't the worst kind of earthquake there is, but it was an earthquake. And it lasted only a few seconds, I guess, their office policy. Because he talked, before he went out there, he said, my office building's great. It's new. It's up to earthquake standards. Because he works with an engineering firm that has offices all over the place in Western Canada. And he said, the Vancouver office, I went to a meeting there. I wouldn't want to be in an earthquake there. That's an old building. It's brick. And those people are toast. So he was well aware of everything. And he didn't know what was going on. The office people didn't know what's going on. They are instructed to go under their desks. And I just watched a video on YouTube from the excellent Johanna Wagstaff of CBC Television, public broadcaster in Canada. She's now a seismologist as well as a meteorologist. And yes, she's big. She did a documentary on the radio about the big one, which is due to hit, the west coast of North America. So she's very cognizant of that. And she did a video. She said, you're not supposed to run outside. So consider this a public service announcement. In Vancouver, anyway, you're not supposed to run outside because most people get hurt by falling debris and flying objects outside. So you're supposed to go under a table or a bed and hang on to something and then assess your, how what your building is like after it's over. But yeah, and also the project my son is working on out there is a tunnel underwater. It's not like he's designing it, but that's the project he's assigned to. That's the firm is one of their big projects. And, the thing about that tunnel is that it won't survive an earthquake because it's being held by sediment, by heavy sediment they put under it because it's a pre-constructed tunnel that's laid under water. And the worry is that the earthquake will make the sediment, the tunnel will just dissolve. It'll just float and the water will go in and everyone will die in that tunnel, which is why they're remaking it. So,
right. So let me get this straight. The new one
new one is supposed to be earthquake proof, but I mean, the big one, who knows? I think all bets are off. But yeah, most of the buildings are supposed to be fairly well, it's not a third world country. They've been working on earthquake building codes for a long time out there.
Yeah, and Vancouver known for many, many very tall buildings downtown.
Oh, okay, Brian. So, I mentioned a few weeks ago that my wife was at pickleball and some person from the power utility was there and was during one of our cold snaps, which, praise Jesus, is over. It is a huge difference taking my Nissan Leaf without a heater out in plus 3 degrees with sunshine. And by the way, it's an early spring. It feels like there's a river of water on my front street, which is really weird for here in February. But I guess once you hit March, the sun becomes so powerful that it just melts stuff even when it's below freezing. So then we're almost to March. I'm looking forward to March, looking forward to our time zone change because our time zone doesn't change here. Everyone else's does. And then Eastern becomes earlier. My East Coast programming on TV becomes earlier. Because I can't even stay up for it anymore.
Because we don't change our clocks. That's a weird quirk that the TV shows we watch tend to come on at a different time.
Even my son being out there is 2 hours different, which is weird because, he's texting me when I've been asleep for 3 hours and he hasn't even gone to sleep on a work night yet. So yeah, it's weird. But the SAS power worker for the utility here said that, it's cold and we might have a power shortage, and somebody was asking, what about the wind renewables? And my wife asked about batteries, and he gave a weird answer about that, saying that they don't want to use them because there's only 1,000 cycles on them. Well,
whatever.
That's like not using your electric car because there's only 1,000 cycles. It's still going to last you 20 years. That's 1,000 full cycles, and then it just degrades. He said that wind doesn't work in cold weather. So we had a cold snap, and I thought to myself, it's minus 30s. I can look this stuff up.
Yeah.
I can look at the mix of the energy going into our power grid here, like a lot of people can if you can find the right website. And they don't update it in real time. It's updated, it's 2 or 3 days late for some reason. But I looked it up, and I looked up the weather records for that day, and that day barely went above 30. It did for 4 hours, but it was below 30, which in a lot of wind turbines say they don't work below minus 30 Celsius. But no, the whole province was the same temperature, by the way. It doesn't matter where the wind turbine was. It was still very cold. We were among the warmest places. And they were working. They were contributing a fair amount to the grid. And also to my surprise, how we talk about our power grid is like 45, 50% coal. It's been sitting at 25% for a long time now. It was not only cold, but windy, which is terrible. I don't recommend that. I mean, I when the wind went away one day and it was still like minus 30s, I thought, oh, it's beautiful out. It's really nice. You can breathe the air. It's fresh. You don't feel pain because you've dressed for it. But the wind gets through everything. Like you can't cover your eyes with a ski goggle necessarily.
Yeah.
Everything's exposed.
The last day of the cold snap, it had warmed up a little bit. Like it was only minus 20 instead of minus 35.
Yeah.
But the wind had picked up, so it was even worse. It was so terrible.
Yeah, it was. But now it's beautiful at these temperatures, which they predicted were coming, and they're here. Thank God. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that. And also, I watched a video on YouTube of Neil deGrasse Tyson's YouTube channel. What is it? Star Talk? And
sounds right.
He had a nuclear person on, somebody who worked for the Department of Energy, which is largely to do with nuclear in the United States. I've heard her on podcasts before. She's a professor, but she's advocating for nuclear. And I was yelling at my YouTube a lot. I thought about making a whole video of me yelling at YouTube just to, because they have watch parties for things. And yeah, I thought about putting her in the corner of the screen and me yelling at the screen. But I will say this. There's this overall vibe of she's trying to sell something. So,
yeah,
I mean, you wouldn't try to sell solar on people and say solar works. It's a given. We know how it works and everything like that is in getting deployed. The talk is just like, who is she trying to sell? Is she trying to sell the general public on accepting it? Because I know there's a lot of resistance, and maybe it's unfounded. A lot of people argue that it's unfounded. She did say per megawatt, the number of people killed by nuclear is less than solar. And I thought, okay, well, a nuclear project is a large project, and it's not about, we also don't know how many people died in Chernobyl, let's face it. We don't know how many people will die eventually, how many people will suffer. Now, of course, there's shoddy solar companies probably in places that send people up. I mean, this company that our panels, the manager of it was yelling at people for not putting ropes on some cases.
Yeah.
And
yeah, you could see somebody falling off a roof, installing solar and hurting themselves or dying.
Yeah. But most solar is not rooftop. Most solar is in a large, there's so much of it being done as well that one has to wonder, do you die on a truck going to the site in a car crash? Do you get electrocuted or something like that? I don't know. The overall vibe is she's trying to sell it on, it takes governments, unfortunately, it takes governments. And I said, to my family who was in the background, if solar was a thing, it would be a thing. Who's stopping it? Who are you arguing against? The fact is, it's going to take time, and everything, these new technologies are not rolling out very quickly. And it's a slow process, and we have to decarbonize the grid. But the thing is, we have the capability of decarbonizing the grid by 2035 if we wanted to. And that's what we sort of needed to do to meet our Paris Agreement guidelines for decarbonizing. I watched a long video by Kyle Connor, the out of spec guy, on YouTube. It's actually 2 hours and 30 minutes. I don't know how much of it I watched, but I watched a lot of it.
Wow.
I was sick. Some of it I just listened to because I was sick for a while and I had dizziness, so I had to listen to it. But I did watch some of it, and over the course of a number of days of killing time and waiting to get better. So yeah, he was driving from Shanghai to Beijing in a car. I forget which model it was, but the company, I think it was one of the battery swap companies, Neo, I think, and they actually sent a car, even though he was driving to like 2 a.m. or something. they sent another car behind him to help with problems because he didn't have a local phone. He couldn't initiate some charging sessions. And I learned a lot of things. One thing, though, I learned that was my big surprise was that American fast food is there, and it's better in China, much better in China than it is here.
Wow.
Which made me think, James, maybe communism's for you. After all, if that's what it takes to have decent fast food, because boy, howdy, has it gone down in value here. And then I learned that there's still a lot of toilets that are just holes in the ground, squat toilets. Did you encounter any of those in your trip?
Not me.
No. Well, apparently they're becoming less. It's more like in the some cities and in the boonies, but yeah, it's just basically a little trough in the ground that you have to squat over and bring your own toilet paper. And I guess Kyle's girlfriend knew that and looked into it beforehand. So yeah, now I'm back to hating communism again and thinking, no. But wouldn't it be great if they could do fast food properly? Again, like when we were kids. I don't remember fast food sucking and getting orders wrong all the time.
I mean, I guess I don't think I really remember, but yeah, at a certain point, the only way for those fast food chains to make more money is to cut costs. So I assume that's what they're doing.
Yeah, they have to cut costs because people don't want to spend. So I also learned that there's lots and lots of chargers in China, but the problem is they put them out too quickly because the cars are now better than those chargers. They charge, 2-3 times faster than those chargers. Although the chargers are everywhere, the cars have improved faster. So that's a lagging thing, and perhaps that's true here.
Yeah, well, that's always the case with technology. Sometimes if you're too early, it's not as good.
But not a problem charging, and yeah, they have state chargers, they have company chargers, they have car-branded chargers, and the swapping was interesting. But I thought of a problem with swapping batteries. We talked about this. It takes 3 or 4 minutes, and you basically pull up and tell the car you're there. The car backs into this, what looks like almost like an oil change garage, just one single garage door open, puts it in, and it's automated procedure where it lifts your car up, lifts it just a bit, takes out the battery. Your car keeps working, which is nice. It never used to. Apparently, that's something they resolved because, if you have AC on or listening to music.
Yeah.
So that continues. But I thought, you can't go to the bathroom doing that.
No, I guess not.
If you can't get a drink, so if you've driven for 3 or 4 hours and you want a break, you can't do that. The battery stops. So maybe you're better off charging because, charging is getting down to 14 or 15 minutes in cases, and in the future it will be. We're talking about trajectories here.
Yeah, and it depends on the weather and stuff. It's always easier in the summer. Like we obviously have problems in the extreme cold, but I drove to Winnipeg not too long ago. That's a 6-hour drive from where we live. 2 charging stops, and in both cases the car was ready before I was, like 7-8 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, but you go get a snack, you go to the bathroom. Swapping would have gained me no time.
Yeah,
like in
people
instance.
think that they can do this in 2 minutes, these stops, I'll just hit the bathroom and grab a drink, but it actually takes a lot longer than that. It takes probably 10, 12, 15 minutes, depending on what you're doing. And that's about what a charger will be able to do in the future. They're there now. It's just a matter of getting them out. And of course, you'll have to pay more for that than you would. You'll have to pay more for a 15-minute charge than a 30-minute charge. So why not just get the 30-minute charge? I'm not talking about Tesla because Tesla is Tesla. But, at other places, if you have a choice between a really fast charger and a slower charger that does it at 30 minutes, well, just go have your lunch and pay half as much because that's literally what it is some cases, even now.
Yeah, and I always have to adjust the navigation if I'm driving somewhere because the car doesn't know when you want to stop for lunch. Like the car doesn't know when you're hungry. So, I always have to kind of play around with the stops and and maybe add a stop where it wasn't planning a charging stop because I know that's where I'm having lunch.
Right. I'm looking forward to using the Tesla network in the future, and we'll see. By the way, everyone, if you want to contact us, we'd love to hear from our listeners for anything that's on your mind. Contact us by email at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And you can also leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. And by the way, this is your last chance to enter our contest to win 1 free year of membership in our Clean Club. That's on Patreon. You get all kinds of perks for being in the Clean Club. That gets our Patreon podcasts and many, many other exclusive perks. We're going to draw for anyone that has a free membership or a supporter membership, which is just as little as $1 a month. and up. To get into the main tier, which is the Clean Club tiers, you'll have that for a year and you'll be able to get all those perks for free. And I just realized that they can give out a gift membership. So I decided we should have a contest and give one away because I know I can't afford things like that. And maybe you want to support the podcast. So go out and do that.
That's great. All right. Now, from The Guardian, this is slightly off topic, but it was so fun. And, we do talk about dams a lot.
Sure.
They're normally hydroelectric dams, and it is a very big topic in the clean energy world. But this story came across my computer. It's from a couple of weeks ago from The Guardian. In the Czech Republic, they were planning for years to build this dam, like it was a conservation-style dam, not a hydroelectric dam. But there was endangered species like crayfish in this area, and they were working on a plan since 2018 to build this dam, and it was going to cost about $1.2 million US. It all stalled because they had to negotiate over this land. This is land that was occasionally used by the military as training grounds. So this dragged on from 2018, and they never got it started. And then they went there one day, and it turns out some beavers had just accomplished this for them for free.
Really?
Yeah.
So I saw a documentary, I think it was a news story documentary on YouTube recently about a place, I don't know if it's Montana or where it was, but they were shooting all the beavers, because they didn't want to disrupt their water supply.
Yeah. Now, this isn't going to work in every instance. Like, it's not like, hey, we need a dam built here. Let's throw some beavers in there and maybe they'll build it for us. Because, sometimes you don't want the beavers there. Sometimes they're a nuisance.
But sometimes you do. And then in this story, they did. So they brought in a beaver. I think they brought in a couple. They trapped them, brought them in, and they went right to work building a dam on this dried up riverbed. And then there was water, and then the ranchers had water, and it changed their lives. And so now, you have to be in tune with ecology to survive out there. So that was a very interesting story to me.
Yeah, and now there are beavers out at my cottage, which is Moose Mountain Provincial Park, but they're not native to the area. Somehow they got brought there.
Really?
And so they do occasionally apparently blow up the beaver dams because they're holding the water.
I saw a beaver out there because we went kayaking the first summer we were out there. This is before we were at your cottage, I think, before the pandemic. They had it was a long weekend, and the park service had a kayak try. And then we ended up buying a couple of kayaks after that, eventually. And James struck gold on the used market a couple of times because people don't use their kayaks. So they're practically brand new and still have the stickers on them. So we went out on the little Knossi Lake, which is what it's called, right? And at the end, there was a beaver. And we could just talk to it and look at it.
Yeah, and I forget the story about how they were introduced, but there's no rivers that feed these lakes. Like, it's higher elevation, and it's all a series of interconnected lakes that are...
so why would they be there?
Exactly, but they're fed by rainwater. So the main lake, Knossi, sometimes has water level problems where the water level drops.
Yeah.
And this is sometimes due to beavers holding back the water from other lakes. So in order to get the water where the park people want it, they will sometimes, blow up a beaver dam.
Man, I hate to have my house blown up, but... Maybe that's where the beavers are on our nickel and our coin. Maybe they came to pose for they brought them in to pose for the coin engraving when we first put the beaver on the nickel.
Yeah, so just a thing here from the articles, they were hoping to build a barrier to protect the Klabava River and its population of critically endangered crayfish from sediment and acidic water spilling over from two nearby ponds. As a bonus, it would turn a part of this protected area south of Prague into a nature-rich wetland, but the beavers went and did it for them. They built a wetland with pools and canals. The area is roughly twice the size of what they had planned to do for a $1.2 million.
And I see your next story. I saw that on the news. The world's biggest beaver dam.
Yeah, well, this led me down a rabbit hole of looking up beaver dams. And so the world's largest beaver dam is in Wood Buffalo National Park, the largest national park in Canada. It's not too far. Have you been there?
No, I haven't been there, and I come awfully close. Like we've decided just to guess it at the last second a couple of times. Yeah, that's on my bucket list in Manitoba.
Yeah, so that's the world's largest beaver dam is there. And to see it, you have to either trek days through tough landscape.
They saw this on satellite, didn't they? And no one actually saw it in person because it's really hard to get to. And
it's visible from space.
Yes.
But not so easily visible from land, apparently. So yeah, the only way to get there is to trek for days or, some kind of a private sightseeing tour. But it's about 800 meters long, and meters are similar to yards.
Isn't this the first person to actually lay eyes on it? Not even indigenous people or anything were able to see it? Because I thought that's what was in the news story. The first person, he decided he was just going to go, if you're a backwoods person, you can be the first at doing something these days is pretty cool.
There's lots of backwoods out by our lake where sometimes, we venture a little bit, like a 10-minute walk into the woods, but it's vast and endless. And, if this is the largest.
Do you leave breadcrumbs?
Yeah, we just don't go that far, but yeah. It's 800 meters from end to end. It holds back water. About 70,000 square meters is the total area.
One family of beavers built an 800 meter. That's a lot of chewing, guys.
Visible from space.
That's ambitious. Respect for the beaver.
Yeah.
Because that, hey, Martha, I think we should do a dam here. It's going to be about 800 meters. It's going to take us years. A lot of biting of wood and carrying, but man, I think it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, and they're able to protect themselves that way from predators because then they build their houses,
Yeah, but why not just build a small one? You could have a whole city into that. City of beavers.
Well, it's the palatial estate of beaver dams.
I remember seeing the beavers at the Toronto Zoo after closing because we were late getting out and we stopped and there was no one around and they were very friendly. They came up just right to the window and smiled and said, "Let me out of here. Captivity's not for me." And I said, "Ha, hilarious." And I left. Japan's biggest nuclear reactor has been inactive since the Fukushima disaster. That's the nuclear disaster after the earthquake and tsunami in 2011. The nuclear plant on Japan's western coast is just one step away from resuming power production. It's all ready to go. Regulators and international nuclear officials have given their approval, but the local governor hasn't signed off. Now, after that disaster, they shut down all the nuclear. There was not a lot of favorability for nuclear in the population after that, and they were scared that everybody else, would this survive a wave or what would happen? So they had to, in some cases, upgrade them. And regulators and international nuclear officials, even though they've given their approval, it's still stuck in limbo. The situation reflects Japan's complicated relationship with nuclear power. The country shut down all of them, but public opinion has shifted since then, is now on the rebound. Over half the population supports restarting nuclear reactors now compared to just a quarter in 2015. Japan has restarted 14 reactors in the past decade to meet growing energy demands, but none are run by this company, TEPCO. Getting the plant back online would help restore TEPCO's reputation. However, the governor there, the local governor, hasn't indicated when or how he'll make his decision. He's just been quiet about it. So until he decides so, the plant's future remains uncertain.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll...
Elections matter, people. Elections matter.
Yeah. All right, from Canary Media, we've talked about this before, but the final numbers are in for 2024. Heat pumps outsold gas furnaces again in 2024. Now, there is a caveat because sometimes with heat pumps, you need more than one unit depending on what your house situation is. Like you might actually have 3 units if they're the wall type ones in different parts of your... So that's the caveat, but they are outselling gas furnaces and the gap is increasing. So basically just over 4 million heat pumps were sold in the US in 2024 and just around 3 million of gas furnaces. And if you look at the graph, the gap is widening. So, this is good news. Heat pumps are finally taking off. I mean, we've been talking about them since the beginning of the podcast, but it seems like, in the last 5 years, people kind of more often understand what a heat pump is.
Now, I think a lot of this is in the U.S. Northeast and the Southeast where there's a lot of, oil furnaces, heating oil furnaces. So this is an economic shift.
Yeah.
And there's incentives to do it.
That's the best upgrade is if you're going from heating oil. That makes the most financial sense. And for now, the Inflation Reduction Act still has rebates. So look that up if you're looking to buy a heat pump. We don't know how long these incentives might last under the current administration, but yeah, up to $8,000 in rebates possible in the US if you're looking to buy a heat pump.
So reminder that a heat pump is a reverse air conditioner. It transfers heat. And as long as your temperature is above Kelvin, which I sometimes think ours isn't,
yeah,
means there's energy in the air that can be transferred theoretically.
Yeah.
And right now they're able to do it down to, 22 to 30 degrees below. And you are a guinea pig, Brian. You have a very cold climate, as we've suffered through long cold snaps here, and you've had a heat pump going.
Yeah, and in most places, they're cheaper to operate than gas. Not quite around here because it gets so damn cold.
Yeah.
But
they're less efficient because they have to run constantly, and then you have to have a backup. You're using resistive, which is not any better than 100% efficient, and, natural gas is cheaper. Cheap like Borscht.
Yeah. So, most people are discovering that it is a good financial decision to go with a heat pump versus gas.
All right. Well, file this under missed stories. This is from September of last year, and this is about a different kind of solar.
We've invented this special lens that captures the solar energy and converts it to high temperature heat. And so this allows us to store the heat in these heat batteries or thermal batteries very cost effectively, especially as compared to electricity. All of this is packaged in a modular system that is roughly the size of a 40-foot shipping container.
I thought this was interesting. This is a company that has sort of an array of solar panels, but they're not solar as we know them. This is in the neighborhood of what we were talking about last week, where these concentric circles of mirrors were around a tower with a fluid in it that reflected the sun. This is doing the same thing in a more manageable way. It is concentrating like a magnifying glass on top of these shipping containers that contain a fluid which heats kind of like a brick material inside of it. And they're modular. You don't need to have a grid connection, as say if you have a mine somewhere. We talked about small modular nuclear.
Yeah.
Well, this kind of works too, and it saves it for hours and days in there. It stores the energy like batteries, and because this is a different kind of battery than a chemical battery, like a lithium-ion battery that they use for grids, which are still pretty expensive but worthwhile in a lot of cases, and on the trajectory of coming down rapidly and improving the technology. But this is ready to go, and they're building as many of these as they can build, basically. It's backed by OpenAI's Sam Altman, and it's based in Miami. And this, like I say, it's modular. So if you have a data center, you can go to where that data center is and set these things up. Not everywhere. It's about 60% of the US where this works really well.
Yeah.
So it probably wouldn't work where we are, and that's why we've had failed solar thermal of other kinds around here. But there's a lot of places in the world where it would work well. And we talked a lot about storing energy in brick before. Like that's kind of become a big catch phrase that we hear a lot now. And it's not because it's so simple. There's nothing, and the bricks inside last 30 years, right, before they break down. Even though they're heating and cooling constantly, they last 30 years, which is what a solar panel will last as well, a normal PV solar panel. So it combines a solar energy collector with a thermal battery made from clay and ceramic composite. Not necessarily bricks, but a material like bricks inside. It stores solar energy as heat, which can be converted into electricity. I thought, how do you convert heat into electricity unless you're boiling water and running a turbine? And so you would need a water source. Well, there's different ways, which I'll get to. So energy can be stored for months, Brian. Months. Not 100% of it, but some of it can be stored for months. With most customers, they want only 8 to 24 hours of dispatchable power. So this is just a matter of keeping basically solar energy of form and having it last around the clock to the next day. So it's interesting. It's an unsubsidized energy rate of just 4 cents per kilowatt hour, which is really good nowadays.
Yeah. We pay about 15 cents.
Yeah, but this is a retail rate, like say the the steel plant that uses an electric arc furnace
Yeah.
up the road from me, they're probably paying around 8 cents because they buy so much power, so it's a lot lower.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a pretty good rate to. It's a lot cheaper than nuclear. So they could do this, and when this gets proven, it could become a thing. I think that chemical batteries will supplant this at some point when the cost comes down and the effectiveness of those comes down. But this is a fairly easy and reliable source of power. And point four, they actually think it could be less than that. It could be half that once they, scale this up. So the market demand and impact, well, it's addressing the growing energy needs of AI-driven data centers, which we hear a lot about, and we're not really certain exactly how much it's going to take because the Chinese have proven that they could do it with less power. But it threatens climate commitments and great grid stability. And this has the company has a demand backlog of 1.2 gigawatts, which is a lot from major data center operators and renewable energy developers. And the guy in an interview, the person who was running the company said that, even if our price was twice as high, we would still have about the same demand.
Yeah.
Because, they need things like this. So the first project launching is in West Texas with a large crypto mining client, expanding to 50 megawatts next year. Yeah, it's not nothing, but the geothermal, I'm always discouraged by how low the megawatts are from current geothermal plants because they're like 530 and, you can throw up a solar farm. Even here, you can throw up a solar farm of 100 megawatts pretty easily where we live, and they're starting to do that finally. Scalability and limitations, well, it's ideal for regions with ample sunlight, which is only 60% of U.S. data centers where they're located now. But that's a lot because, you put the data centers where you want to put them, but 60% of them would be covered quite well by this technology, and they're upfront about that. And it focuses on data centers due to the simpler scalability compared to heavy industrial retrofits. So it's pretty easy to scale this to power banks of computers. So you've got modular shipping containers full of the power and modular shipping containers full of computers, and it's a weird futuristic situation. This aims to reduce data centers' carbon footprints, which, the big data companies are having trouble meeting their climate commitments. They've made bold and appropriate climate commitments, but, they're having trouble with the advent of AI. It could be a problem. So this, they feel, will support the renewable energy transition, providing a cleaner power source. So heat to electricity conversion. When electricity is needed, the stored heat is released to drive a heat engine, a thermoelectric generator, which went right over my head. These systems typically work by heating a fluid to produce steam that powers a turbine connected to an electric generator, similar to traditional steam power plants. But you can also use thermoelectric materials that convert temperature differences directly into electric voltage. I'm not an electrical engineer, but I find that fascinating. So it's a temperature difference that creates electricity. When one side of a thermoelectric material is hot and the other side is cool, a temperature gradient is created. And in the hot region, atoms vibrate more, giving electrons more energy. These high-energy electrons move towards the cooler side, where atoms are less energetic. And this movement of electrons from the hot side to the cool side creates an electric current. And wow. Who knew?
What, like the McDLT, the hot side hot and the cool side cool?
It was electric, Brian. I threw up violently the last one I had, and I couldn't have them anymore. It was a good idea, except for the packaging, of course.
Well, I love the simplicity of this because there's a picture online of this, and looks so simple. It's basically a shipping container, and we can't, from the picture, quite see what's in it, but it's like a shipping container of rocks and then, a magnifying glass, like a rack of magnifying glasses above it. And, it's a little more complicated than that, but it's so simple.
Yeah. And that's, no moving parts. It just works. Coming up next, it is the lightning round. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
So I've talked about this before. The Ram is coming out with an electric pickup truck that has a hybrid system, but the hybrid system is only a power generator that runs off of fossil fuel. Okay? So that makes electricity, and it's still an electric pickup truck. There's no, transmission. There's no crap like that. It just is an engine that will run a generator and power the truck. Now, some details have come out about that because they're getting closer to releasing it. When the truck is out of electric power, the Ram Charger can travel the rest of the way on gas using its 3.6-liter V6 engine as a generator to feed electricity to its front and rear motors. See, if I had a truck and I was towing, I would like the electric part of that. I wouldn't want to lose that and become a combustion truck because it's so slick to have an electric version of something that goes fast, powerful and towing and speeding up and everything.
Yeah, you want that electric torque for towing.
When out of electrical energy, Ram says that its targeted fuel economy is only 20.5 miles per gallon, which isn't spectacular, but it's not terrible either for a pickup truck, especially when you're carrying around a heavy battery already. Here's the thing that's really different about it. A 92 kilowatt hour battery is in the truck, but it's only 70 kilowatts usable. Why is that? Well, apparently it's reserved just for towing. So, we have usable parts of batteries now, but that's to keep the battery healthy. But that's a big difference between 70 and 92.
Yeah.
While they're reserving that for the times when you tow so that you don't have such a terrible loss of range, which is greater in electric trucks because they're so efficient. And then, so that'll make it more usable for the regular person.
Yeah, so presumably it will detect when you're hauling something heavy and then give you access to the rest of the tank, so to speak, of the battery. So, your range will probably look the same when you're towing.
India offered $1.28 billion for solar rooftop subsidies last year. And you might think they should be doing that for solar farms for utility scale. They're not. This is just most of their subsidies are for rooftop. But this is giving power to the people. And they've nearly doubled that this year to $2.31 billion. So they are going hard on rooftop solar. And that is a good thing for the people of India because they'll have some freedom from power outages, from expenses and reliability, and they can do their part. Indonesia plans to peak coal by 2037 under its latest electricity master plan. That's lagging behind a 2030 Paris-aligned scenario. And Brian, that sounds like home. We're doing that here for no good reason. So
they're talking about keeping the coal running.
Projects in California interconnection queue alone, that is projects for renewables that are getting ready to be connected to the grid in the queue, will bring the state near 100% renewable energy 24/7 and 365. And I found this interesting. There's 3 gigawatts. Think of a gigawatt as a nuclear reactor. 3 gigawatts of transmission being built to bring 3.5 gigawatts of new wind being constructed. This is wind farms outside California that will be a part of the California grid and exclusively for the California grid. In New Mexico, just for California. This is the first I've heard of something like this, and it is what we need to do to make renewables work, and it's not that hard. It is doable.
And it makes sense because California's got a ton of people. New Mexico, not as many people. So sure, why not build the power from one to the other?
And New Mexico makes money off of it. China's exports of wind turbines are up 70% in 2024. We talk about wind struggling because of COVID. The supply chains made things more expensive and contracts, were thrown away because they couldn't meet it. There was part shortages. Well, 70%. That's still going strong. This is exports, not what China's using themselves, but exports. China invested $940 billion in clean energy in 2024, Brian. That's almost matching the $1.1 trillion in global fossil fuel investment. Just clean energy in China was almost matching the same investments in global fossil fuels. So China's clean energy grew to 10% of GDP. That is not something that you want to hurt. That is, if Trump's economy was 10% GDP for clean energy, they wouldn't be talking negatively about it because, the car industry is typically like 6% or something like that. Texas is the place with a lot of wind energy, right? You know that. Everyone knows that. If you listen to our podcast, it's number 1. You know what's number 2? Iowa, but it's a distant number 2.
Did not know that.
No, it's a distant number 2. Around a third of Texas's full year wind energy generation total is produced during the months of March, April, and May only. A third of all their wind power comes in those months. I take it because it gets windy there during that time of the year. It gets windy here. Their weather forecast models call for wind power to climb from the daily current average of only 7,500 megawatt hours per day to around 17,000 megawatt hours per day when the wind is scheduled to pick up later this month and stay windy for a while. That is really significant. Significant change there, and they'll have a significant portion of their power coming from wind. 10 new battery plants are expected to go online this year in the United States, and they may deliver a near double growth in America's cell manufacturing capacity. So, yes, thank you, Biden's Inflation Reduction Plan. These plants are coming online and doubling the amount of batteries in 1 year. This year, it will be double of what it was. That's incredible. Today, utility-scale batteries paired with solar PV panels, that's traditional PV panels that have electricity coming out of them. You see them on the roofs of homes. They are already competitive with new coal plants in some countries like India. That is to say, batteries plus solar is competitive price-wise with newly constructed coal plants in countries like India. But in the next few years, this is from the International Energy Agency, batteries plus solar will be cheaper than even new natural gas plants in the U.S. and new coal in China. Coal is cheap in China, so they're still building them, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's something, and something that we talk about down the road from us. Building a gas plant doesn't seem to make any sense. This is from the San Diego Union Tribune, which is a mouthful. San Diego Union Tribune. It's a newspaper in San Diego. California is pushing forward with offshore wind despite Trump, says the San Diego Union Tribune. That's a mouthful, Brian, but yes, they are going forward, California, with offshore wind, and that is a challenge because they don't have a high shelf, so they might have to have floating wind down there because it gets too deep, basically, near the shore. EU's LNG terminal utilization, that is natural gas, liquefied natural gas terminals on ports in the European Union, the utilization fell from 58% to 42% in 2024. I remember in the early days of the podcast when the Ruskies invaded Ukraine, and that is what happened, I believe. It's not the other way around like we're being told now by some idiots somehow. Yeah, that, they have to build more LNG. We were talking about that on the show a lot. Well, the utilization has gone down. Why? Because of renewables being built out and a little luck from the weather gods. And finally this week, why not end on a CES fast fact? In 2019, a typhoon struck Japan's largest floating solar plant, which caught fire when strong winds pushed solar panels on top of each other. So I thought this was a weird story.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of a solar panel farm fire before.
And you wouldn't think that would happen on water, because there's water.
Yeah.
It's floating on water.
Especially water.
And if it's getting splashed around, you'd think there wouldn't be a fire. Well, the Japan-based team, what they did, Brian, is they split that plant after replacing the broken panels into smaller islands floating on the water of solar panels. And since the work was completed in 2021, the plant has withstood repeated typhoons now. So they figured it out.
Wow. No fires.
Floating solar is new. They had a problem that was unexpected. They solved it with a fairly simple problem. Now it works, and it can survive typhoons just fine, thank you. A lot of times we talk about them going on canals and small lakes and things. Yeah, so typhoons are a bit of a problem. After experiencing severe hailstorms in Texas, engineers and designers found that thicker and fully tempered glass on solar panels could make solar panels more hail resistant. They had a problem with big hail in Texas. It broke some panels, so they decided they would study it and find out that fully tempered glass can make the solar panels more hail resistant, especially when the panels are protected with high-quality frames and support bars, which, of course, sounds like a bit more money, but in Texas, you're going to get a lot of money for your solar. And using thicker steel or aluminum to build solar panels and mounting structures is essential for making land-based plants hurricane-proof as well. So don't worry, it's all going to be fine. They figure these things out. They're small things. Yeah, a lot of this is fairly new, but don't worry.
Yeah, no, hail can sometimes damage solar panels, but it's still fairly rare even without these upgrades. It doesn't happen very often.
It has to be big hail.
It is it is the kind of thing that gets picked up by the anti-clean energy media when they, oh my gosh, this solar farm got wiped out by hail. It's clean energy doesn't work.
Yeah, but they're also using, better forecasting and things like that and different models to actually tilt the panels away from where the hail will come. And then it doesn't hit it direct on. It sort of bounces off of it instead of hitting it directly.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's lots of options for that. So that is our show for this week. You can contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, Clean Energy Pod on social media, and you can join our Patreon community. And there's special free posts on there as well. The link is in the show notes. We have a merch store. You can buy some merch. And if you wouldn't mind, give us a rating sometime on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to click the follow or subscribe button to get us every week.
Thank you to all our Patreon members for supporting this podcast and making it possible. And our Clean Club executive members get a shout out every week. Green Bastard, Brent Routley, and Ryder. The first week of the month, we'll mention everyone else. Join our Patreon today as a paying member and to get access to our exclusive Patreon episodes. And you'll also get ad-free episodes, exclusive access to our Discord server, discounts at our merch store, early access to our episodes before the public, behind-the-scenes material that is not public, and some private updates, and thank you credits on our video podcast every week. And by the way, we're still on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram with our video podcast. So take care, everyone. We'll see you again in 7 days.
See you next week.